Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the M4L Academy Book Club. Here we interview the authors of some of the top books on the subjects that we cover every month. This month, we're talking to the authors of Screen Schooled. This book tackles the topic that we are in right now of edtech data collection. Yeah, it's a topic that's pretty much glued to our fingertips, screens. But it's more than just those little glowing rectangles that promise knowledge, connection, and entertainment. We'll also be discussing how those school Chromebooks and iPads can deliver distraction, dopamine hits, and digital chaos instead of knowledge. Well, okay, maybe some knowledge, I'm sure a little bit, but they still deliver distraction, dopamine hits, and digital chaos. Our guests today are Miles and Joe Clement, the brilliant minds behind Screen Schooled. And these two aren't just armchair critics, they are veteran teachers who've seen firsthand what happens when schools go digital. And their insights might surprise you. Or maybe they won't, but they'll at least help you understand what's going on. We'll discuss why tech leaders often choose low tech schools for their own children, what happens when education becomes an app store, and how parents can make informed choices in a tech saturated world. Turns out handing a kid a tablet could be harming their future learning. So grab your coffee, silence those notifications, and yes, I am looking at you. And let's dig into the truth behind the EdTech hype with a thoughtful discussion about balancing tech and true learning. Welcome back to class. I am super excited to have you guys here because this book, when we were starting our research for our topic of EdTech, data collection, and AI, there's actually a couple of books out there. There's more than I was expecting, but a lot of it's on social media and specifically, and not necessarily on the technology, especially EdTech. I feel like you touch on other things too, especially phones are heavily covered in here. But can you tell me a little background on yourselves and what got you started to writing this book?
Matt, you want me to start?
Go ahead, Joe.
I've been teaching for 32 years in the public schools, and it's been a great career. And probably 15 years ago, no, probably 10 years ago, started to notice kids were less able to solve problems, think deeply, concentrate, focus for any length of time, even interact socially. And wasn't quite sure what was going on, what the issues were. And Matt was having the same observations. And so we started to look around at what was out there in terms of like what was happening with kids in general. And everything we read, everything we came across, the studies, the medical reports, and so on, all mentioned some sort of screen excessive use component. So we said, well, we better look and see what's out there about screens in school and screens in education, because all we were being told was screens are great and kids love screens, and so we got to use your phone in the classroom and figure out how to use social media and get kids involved and plugged in and blah blah blah, 21st century skills and so on and so forth. And we figured out there was nothing out there on screen use in school and excessive screen time in any sort of negative way. And so we've figured we would write the book because everything we were writing or everything we were reading was academic peer-reviewed research that seemed to paint this very clear connection between worse outcomes for kids and excessive screen use. And yet here we were in schools just making kids be on screens all day long. So there wasn't anything out there really specifically about screens in school. So we wrote it ourselves.
And I
Yeah,
think
and
you
just
faced a little controversy, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I feel like you told me you faced a little pushback when you wrote this book, right? And sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, when and Joe kind of hit on this when we wrote the book. The backdrop is, on the one hand, you had all the peer-reviewed research saying one thing, which was primarily negative about overuse and addiction and the lack of focus and all these bad outcomes. And then on the other hand, we were totally inundated. Joe kind of undersold it. Every in service, everything we were being told was how wonderful this is. In order to teach in the 21st century, it had to be digitalized, right? If you were doing something on pen and paper or something old school, right, you weren't preparing kids for a future, and that just kind of gave us pause. So when we wrote this was completely in opposition to everything we were being told, and everything that our counties were investing, you know millions upon millions into ed tech and laptops and iPads and software, all this, stuff that when you read what they were saying was, quote unquote, research that supported more ed tech and everything they were saying, it was purely anecdotal and it was almost entirely funded by the companies selling it. So what we were saying was completely opposed to, the mission of schools, a lot of the schools. So we got a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
That I feel like I feel like a bit like a conspiracy theorist when I say it always comes back to money, but it seems like it always comes back to money, and so it's
Yeah.
not too surprising, unfortunately, that you hear that the companies are funding the research. That, of course, they're going to make it sound really good. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to transition into jump right into some of the topics that you have, some incredible things you covered in there. And moving right to chapter 3, you tackle one of the toughest truths overall in the book. And that is when we lower academic rigor and replace authentic learning with tech-driven shortcuts. You say that we end up with something called a dumbed down curriculum and a dumbed down student. And you described how digital tools meant to make learning easier or more engaging, while they often do the opposite. And they remove the productive struggle, which I think is such an important thing. It's really funny because we get the idea of no pain, no gain, and yet somehow in the gym, but somehow we don't
Right.
apply it to learning.
That's right.
So what it seems like this ends up creating what we have talked about with some other guests called this illusion of learning, where you think you master, but you really don't as a student.
Yeah.
Can you
Correct.
talk about what you've seen in classrooms that led you to make that connection, that dumbed down curriculum that leads to the dumbed down student?
Well, I think the first thing is the point you hit on is, no pain, no gain. It holds in the classroom as well. And if you make things easier, there's no way a kid is going to retain anything. So if a kid, if we're talking about whatever the Constitution or something, and we talk about, well, remember what's in Article 2, Section 2 about the powers of the president, um, rather than knowing what's in Article 2, Section 2, the first thing they're going to do is pull out their phone, and then blah blah blah, and they'll just recite whatever's on their phone, and then they'll go back to social media or pornography or whatever they were looking at, and there's no real learning, of course, that happened there. They just recited something that they saw on their screen. So that was you could see the kind of the nosedive that learning was taking, because everything was, to a kid, it was like, well, why would I ever need to know anything? You could fill in any class, whether it was English or history or math or whatever, because I've got this thing in my pocket or this laptop or iPad or whatever that just gives me all the answers. Well, if you believe that you have something that gives you all the answers, then why would you ever know anything? Ask somebody under 20 how to get to a restaurant that's 3 blocks from where you live. They have no idea. They don't know the roads. They don't know the turns, because they have this thing that they can just go doink, and then it'll tell you turn left here, turn right there, or whatever. And that's, that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but for a classroom, it's disastrous.
Yeah, one of the things that, ed tech hasn't really been able to rectify is this, the difference between making schoolwork easier and learning easier is totally different, right? They've never made any strides in making learning easier, in my opinion. And what they've done instead is made schoolwork easier. You take that now to ChatGPT and these large language model AI programs, and they can do amazing things with just a couple clicks of a button. They can generate almost any essay or paper, just really abstract concepts. I have my kids do all kinds of, I try to make it more and more difficult for AI to produce something. So I have them do, for psychology, for example, I have them, create their own cult using different like social psych techniques and stuff. I'll go and just to see what ChatGPT will produce, I'll copy and paste the directions into ChatGPT. It does great things. It's amazing. And you can bang out a project in 15 seconds without ever really engaging with the material. So one of the things that a lot of the ed tech proponents confuse is the difference between making schoolwork easier and making learning easier, right? Like, I don't have a quota of projects I have to grade, and they're doing me a favor by producing them as quickly as they can, right? This isn't the business world. I want them to think about concepts and manipulate them in their brain and be creative and do this deep thinking that a lot of the technology that's being promoted actually inhibits.
That is really a good point. And it's funny because as you're talking about that, you said, Joe, the idea of the article and sections, and this, I'm so sorry, I can't. I think it was Article 2, Section 2. You said, or something like that. And the thing I find interesting about that is our brains are so incredible because when you do have that knowledge stored,
Right.
You're able to take it and apply so much context to it. And
Right.
as a super quick example, have you ever seen the movie Ready Player One?
I've not.
That's totally okay. It just so happens we were watching it the other day with my youngest daughter, so that's the only reason why I have this as a specific reference. But any movie would suffice. Long and the short of it is it's set sometime, I want to say in like 2045. It's like way in the future. And the ironic thing is that this movie that's way in the future is, and it might even be further, it might be 2065, I can't remember, but they make a comment that is very much a like late 1990s, early 2000s reference that all I could think to myself was, geez, the path we're on now to this like replacing critical thinking and just like searching facts, kids
Yeah.
would not even begin to understand that. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but let's say it was something like, that's a very Ferris Bueller moment of view or something.
Yeah.
And it's pieces like that when you have that cultural context, within seconds, your brain applies so much more than is able to be communicated through a whole big long paragraph. And that's what I'm hearing you guys talk about, or I'm hearing the heat between the lines, I should say. And it makes me feel pretty sad for our kids. I feel like they're really going to be missing out.
Yeah, for sure. If your brain doesn't have anything to hook other stuff onto, then the information goes in one side and out the other side, and that's the end of it. But when it's got, like you're talking about, when it's got context, and you go, oh yeah, I know actually this thing, and that relates to, oh, you just said this thing that makes me think of this other thing. Now you're building connections, and that's where learning happens. But the fact it is true. Like I mean, obviously having a calculator is great. Like, if I need to do something real fast or whatever, there are tools that can be used obviously in very effective and wonderful ways. But learning and replacing the process, the work and the sweat that goes along with learning, that's not the place for in most cases. That's not the place for a digital tool.
So I have to ask, following up from that, because Matt, real quick, sorry, I wanted to see,
Sure.
based on what you said before. So you were saying it's making schoolwork easier, not making learning easier. Is that something that even can be done? Can you make learning easier? Because like, let's look at physical work, right? You're only going to get good at doing sit-ups by doing sit-ups. They don't get easier. You just do them. So
Right.
Is it the same thing for learning, or maybe I'm thinking of it wrong?
No, you're thinking of it absolutely right. A lot of what we're trying to do is put concepts into kids' brains, otherwise memorize them. A lot of people kind of sleep on memory. Why memorize something that you can just look up, like Joe was saying earlier? Well, we want those vast neural networks because they catch new ideas. One of the things that drives me nuts is, this is a little off topic, but a lot of people say, well, just look it up. Well, look what up, right? If you're reading an article that is wrongly attributing a causal relationship when it's really a corollary, you've never heard either. You're not going to say, let me Google these two terms I've never heard before, right? Like, you have to have that internalized knowledge to make sense of the world around you. And going back to your question, the way that memory works is, it's pretty fascinating. The more you struggle with a concept and you try to recall it, the more likely your brain the way I explain to my students is, your brain pities you. Like, this poor fool can't remember this. So let me help him out and store that. So the more the struggle is, the more your brain internalizes it. The easier something comes to you, the brain says, oh, that was pretty easy. I can look that up in the future, right? So things that come naturally and easily just kind of fade really quickly. So in a way, yes, it's essentially what they're trying to do is that, remember that ad machine you could just hook up to your abs and it would crunch for you, and they'd show the video of the
Yes.
guy watching TV, right? Like it didn't
Yes.
work for a reason, right? Like this stuff isn't working in a similar kind of way.
Yeah.
Boy, I love that you just used that analogy. Actually, that is hilarious because I've always thought that was, wouldn't that be great, right? We can just sit and eat bonbons on the couch and watch TV, and it's going to zap my abs, and that I'm going to have a six pack. Like, gosh, that would
Yep.
be fantastic.
Right.
And the fact is, no, like, I didn't realize that about your brain. Like, I love the way you said that, taking pity on you to help you remember it. That actually makes me want to have that struggle even more, because then I get it more. I mean, it's not fun for kids especially, but that's so important.
Yeah. The thing is, I think kids, it's not that they want the struggle, but they like, I mean, we're curious animals, humans, and kids are the most curious, and they want to kick around ideas, and they want to have something. They want to be able to make connections, and they want to be able to um, realize that, oh, this thing, they feel really good when they walk out of class knowing something or being able to do something that they couldn't do when they walked in. So it is sad, because you miss that, all those moments that make teaching and learning so great are out the window if the perception is, well, I don't need to do this anymore because I got this computer or this phone or whatever that'll do it all for me. It's no
Well,
wonder kids are so sad.
it also discourages, and kind of, again, going down a different path, it discourages that engagement in class, right? Like if what he's talking about up there is going to be tested on this assignment that I can just put into ChatGPT when I'm at home, and you know why would I engage with what's going on in class? I can do really well on the assignments and figure everything out on my own. It's fascinating to watch, kids just kind of piss away a whole day of school just playing on their phone or playing on their laptop, and then sure enough, they turn in a great assignment, right? But when that incentive to engage is no longer there, and you give them, you're talking about teenagers here, adolescents and children, right? You give them an alternative that is infinitely more fascinating, infinitely more compelling, in terms of like a smartphone with games and social media and videos, and similarly with their laptops, right? It's hard to kind of reach kids between them and their screen, trying to, because again, there's no incentive.
Oh yeah. Well, and so this reminds me of in chapter 8 when you're talking about the achievement gap, and you have a great quote there. And so I just want to read the quote real quick that says, "Giving these devices would be like handing out full glasses of wine at an AA meeting and asking the leader to make sure the participants were only using them to make music on the rim." First of all, what a great image. That is so, that really hits it home. Although I will say, see if you don't know what an AA meeting, and then it's not going to make any sense to you at all. So there's a little
Correct.
little tidbit on the importance of understanding context.
You're right. You're right.
But it's funny because one of the areas that, okay, I want to say this right, because the thing that's a little interesting is my business background is all in technology, or almost exclusively in technology, implementing enterprise systems, implementing process improvements, using technology, streamlining systems. And so I very much can see the benefits that technology can bring, but there are a lot of pitfalls that come with it as well.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I see, the thing that will always set people apart, in my opinion, I'm not going to say like I'm the only one to say this, but is you can be, I think it's that motivation, right? So like if someone is willing to go above and beyond, they're always going to do better than someone who is super intelligent but is just coasting and utilizing these tools. The
Yeah.
ironic thing is that this this is where it comes back to the achievement gap. I'm so sorry. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. So I see it as really sad because we have the big this difference in kids who are able to, well, frankly, we talk about it like socioeconomic situations. So the really rich
Right.
kids are able to achieve so much more further, and kids who are in difficult situations don't have that opportunity. And the fact is that kids in difficult opportunity or situations probably aren't getting that direction and guidance and motivation to go push yourself and try harder and be better and all of those things, whereas kids that are in really rich families probably are.
Right.
So I see that this type of thing only making it worse for
Oh, yeah.
that difference. So can you talk to me a little bit more about, first of all, the amazing image and how it's so ridiculous that we are expecting this from our kids, but then am I understanding that correctly? Am I on the right path, or am I like totally off in left field with this achievement gap?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. In fact, one of the things we know is that there are it's far more likely that that a device is essentially a babysitter in a home that's financially disadvantaged than in a home that's where there are books and maybe a parent or maybe two at home or some sort of caretaker at home. We know that there was a study in 2000. It was right around the time we wrote the book. When we wrote the book, this was a brand new study. It was in North Carolina, and um, they were studying the results of introducing technology into not just the school, but into homes where the families couldn't afford internet access and they couldn't afford computers and so on. And what they found was introducing the internet and introducing the computer to, particularly to a financially disadvantaged household, worsened educational outcomes. Not just increased the achievement gap, or not. It wasn't that the top end got higher; it was that the bottom end got lower. And what they found is that what was happening is, as Matt mentioned, it's all these things that are on the internet and on your phone and everything else are super engaging. They're super interesting. They're tremendously addictive. And if nobody's watching you, and you don't, then there's not somebody at home because both parents are working 20 hours a day and so on. I mean, what are you going to, you're a 13-year-old. I mean, thank the Lord. When I was 13, there was nothing like this around, so I didn't have to deal with it. But it's a very difficult thing to ask of a young person whose prefrontal cortex is not developed. I'll just hold off. Delay gratification. Don't look at all that interesting stuff. Like, there's no chance I would have ever been able to do that. And most of us, when we were that age, 12, 15, 17, 10, whatever, you can't do it. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult ask of a kid, first of
Well,
all.
and we saw this play out in a natural experiment in COVID, right? Like
Yeah.
in our school system, we wouldn't start school until we ensured just about every kid had access to a laptop and some type of Wi-Fi connection through, what do they call it, like a hot pad or whatever.
A
So
hotspot?
yeah, something like that. So they gave every kid a device that could somehow connect them to the internet. Now I'm
Okay.
sure that wasn't universal, but it was as close to 100% as they could get, and then we could continue because we didn't want to leave certain kids behind. I totally understand that. So we made sure every kid of every socioeconomic background had the same access to education, and most kids didn't learn anything that year. But what you did see is that among the kids who really struggled, it was primarily the historically disadvantaged groups that we've always seen, right? And that, again, the widening of the achievement gap. I would argue most kids didn't learn anything, but primarily, and it wasn't because of the lack of technology in many cases. It was the lack of, like Joe was saying, the lack of supervision, the lack of, these other things that would make people of higher socioeconomic classes and historically advantaged groups do better is because there's somebody watching over them, making sure they're using their technology productively. If you don't, I don't care who you are or where you're from, if you don't have somebody making sure, 90% of kids aren't able to just lock in and be productive with
Yeah.
access to everything else. And that gets to, this huge problem we have with technology. It's mostly made by obviously not educators and often probably people without a lot of access to kids. There's this idea that children are just small adults, right? Their brain is just a less knowledgeable version of an adult brain, and that just simply misunderstands cognitive and physical and mental development altogether. You can't kids, right? My wife's company is instantaneously switched from all in person to all online when COVID went down, and just using the same tools. We rolled out the same exact tools for teenagers, and it was just an absolute disaster. We went for about 15 minutes before the whole school system had to shut down because kids shockingly were being kids. And We often don't think of in terms like that when we put technology in front of kids. We assume that this is a tool that's productive in the workforce, so therefore it'll be productive for young people, and it just misunderstands where they are developmentally.
Right.
That is so, so true. I gotta be honest, there are some times I look back at COVID and I'm like, it feels so surreal that we actually
Yes.
lived through that. I have one more question. Is there a difference in the way that school ed tech especially impacts boys versus girls in schools? Are you seeing any differences that way?
Well, I think, but the classic dichotomy that people draw is that boys are more drawn to pornography and girls are more drawn to social media. They're starting to be equally drawn to video games. But the point is, as far as I'm concerned, that we all like to think school systems will always say, "Oh, and there's safeguards. We got it. There's a firewall. There's this. There's that. Whatever." And I think parents a lot of times are misguided about firewalls and safety precautions that are on devices, and there are some very good ones. Schools aren't using them, and a lot of parents assume, you get this laptop that in many cases, in many school systems around the country, you take home with you and it sort of becomes your device if you're the kid. And so a lot of parents will say, well, I mean, my kid's not that tech savvy and they won't know how to get around the firewall and so on. If one kid figured it out, they're all going to have it because that one kid is going to disseminate the information to everybody and tell you how to get around whatever. So I think there's probably some differences with the way that students, boys versus girls, are misusing the technologies, but they're all misusing. I mean, whenever you give them something, unless it's very targeted for a very specific purpose for a very limited amount of time in class, totally supervised, they're kids, and so
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of nonsense going on.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so I want to. If do you remember? I actually have my book. I was going to bring it up and look at it, see what my numbers were, see what those ones were. They were assumptions. See, I had it like saved because this
Yeah.
spot like really stood out to me. Of the assumptions that technology is just okay. A tech addiction is okay. First one being that regulating is too difficult. You guys say that there could be over up to 50 devices in one class?
Oh yeah. Yeah, but you think about it, every kid, so you got 30 kids, every kid has a laptop that we provided them, and every kid has, just about every kid has a smartphone. You're talking 60 right there, and that's not including mine. Um,
Right.
so,
And not including the smartwatches, and a
Wow.
variety of other Fitbits and whatever else. Oh yeah, yeah. There's probably, I would say 50 is the low end. That was a book. The book came out in 2017. I think you can up that number now.
That number really made me stop and think for a minute. And
Yeah,
I mean, you hit it on the head. Of course, if you're giving them all a laptop, that's 30 right there. Why?
yeah,
But for whatever reason, I just didn't even think to me. That is a
yeah.
lot to regulate. So, but what about for parents? I think that was such a good argument that it's so hard. It's so hard to control it, to manage it. So, what are some techniques? What are some suggestions that you have for regulating if other teachers or parents, for other teachers or parents, if their schools are not taking away technology yet? What would you guys recommend?
Well, to me, they're kind of a two pronged approach. One would be for if we're talking about parents and they're concerned about what the school is doing technology wise, is to educate and advocate. As a parent, you have to be. Schools are afraid of nothing more than a knowledgeable parent. And if you go in armed with facts and say, "Look, here's what I know to be true," boom, 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 and you lay down a reasoned argument, they might not change things right away, of course, but you're going to make inroads if you can be persistent. And the main argument, the main theme that has always bothered me as a parent, I had two sons already go through the public schools, and they moved on, and and I have a daughter that's in sixth grade right now. Um, what always bothered me as a parent was the assumption of the school is that they can tell you as the parent how much time your kid should be spending on a computer, right? Like if you have strict screen time limits in your house, the school essentially says, well, you have to throw those out. We're not going to pay attention to that. They have to do it. This is because their textbook is online, and the set of questions they have to do is on these 5 websites, and there's a digital Dropbox where they have to turn things in, and then they want to find out about homecoming, so they have to get on Instagram to look at the class Instagram account, which is another thing. There's essentially a requirement from schools to be on social media because you want to order your cap and gown, you want to figure out when the reptile club meeting is or whatever. You have to go to the club's Instagram page because they all have them. So as a parent, you're armed with a whole bunch of correctness. Like, you're right, the schools are wrong. That and so the educating yourself about what the school is asking and what you can do about it, and then also advocating and continually being that grain of sand in the oyster is super important. And then I've kind of rambled and I forgot what the second part of the question was.
Oh, just for what can parents and teachers do to push back if their schools aren't? But I realized I distracted because I was asking you to explain initially why tech addiction is so bad, because people it gets an easy rap, like it's thought it's okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons for that is what like you said earlier, it is a difficult task, right? So it requires an Orwellian amount of control from the parent or the teacher. And on the other hand, there's also this narrative going around in ed tech circles that's come kind of prominent is you old fogies are concerned about what kid because you just don't understand, right? The term they'll use is digital immigrants, and there's this notion of you think kids are being unproductive, and you think but they're really learning. There's a whole book out there I think we reference in there. Don't bother me, mom. I'm not gaming. I'm learning. And it's all about how the kids use video games to understand the world around them. And you think that they're on social media, but they're really learning about water conservation techniques in Botswana or something like that. And they're doing all these great things. And Joe referenced this commercial that came out probably 2 or 3 years ago. A kid at like a holiday family festival, and he's just the whole time on his phone, and then the parents are scoffing at him and he's not engaged with anybody, and then at the end he sits down and he puts this wonderful video, and everybody's crying, and it's heartwarming. And if you actually talk to a kid, they find that the notion of being productive and learning like literally laughable. Like they laugh out loud when we show them some of the videos that we're being pushed on as educators. One kid we showed it to said it very succinctly. He goes, if you see me on my phone, there's a 0% chance I'm being productive. If you see me on my laptop, there's about a 50% chance I'm being productive. Right. So, and he's just saying that, but I think most kids would agree with that observation at some level. But again, that's kind of a dismissive, that creates this kind of dismissive attitude. You shouldn't be worried about it. Right. That, kids should be let free to roam the internet and social media and watch videos because that's how they make sense of the world. And you have an issue with it, parents and teachers, because you just don't understand the cool and productive things that they're doing. So there's not even this drive to actually address the issue, right? We're kind of dismissed just from the gate for thinking it's an issue in the first place.
Yeah, that actually, I was so fascinated with what you got, the research that you referenced, or I don't know if I'd say research, but the authors, that book, Don't Bother Me, Mom, that I actually bought it just to understand. How could anyone make this argument? Like, is this really, you wrote a whole book about it?
Yeah.
It's been a challenge to get through. I'm not going to lie. I've yelled at the book once or twice or 10 times. I'm not sure, but I don't think I'm hurting anything because it is written, it is text. So one of the other things too that you talk about as far as reason why tech addiction is considered okay is because it doesn't look like it makes a big deal, which you just kind of touched on as well, this concept that, they're actually doing really good things as opposed to going to the gambling or to the casino or going to the bars and getting drunk or, whatever, or watching it. Well, watching a ton of porn would be something that would happen on tech. But there are other downfalls to the tech addiction. And would you say that, I guess, can you just talk a little bit more about that, of like what some of those other downfalls are that maybe people aren't thinking of?
But a couple of them, just the big one, as far as I'm concerned, is an economist um, and opportunity cost is always the big one for me. What is the kid not doing? Because what we know is that young people are spending now, for a teenager, it's 8.5 hours a day on consuming some sort of digital um, media. What are they not doing for the 8.5 hours a day? So all of that stuff that you and I and anybody who grew up without a phone or a laptop or an iPad, all those things that we did, running around in the woods and meeting at the park and playing basketball and playing Legos and whatever else, all that stuff has been lost. And so because it's not there, you don't see it. So it doesn't seem like, well, that's not a loss. But it should strike us as sad when, and you hear people say this all the time, and I'm sad about the thing, but I'm happy to hear people say it makes them sad. Like when you're at a restaurant and you just see,
Oh,
a lot of times it's the whole family just staring at their phones, but especially, mom and dad want to date, and so they can talk, and then the kids are over across there and they've got their headset on and they're just
oh,
staring at their phone. And um, that shouldn't make us happy to see, to see that.
mm,
Um, and parenting is messy and ugly sometimes. I mean, it's beautiful most of the time, but it's got its moments, of course. But you can get rid of all of the bad stuff. Well, no, I take it back. You can't get rid of all the bad stuff. You can get rid of the immediate need. Mom, dad, blah, 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 if you just hand them an iPad, because they'll sit there and they'll just drool and stare at it and peck around for a while, and they'll give you 15 or 20 minutes or 3 hours or whatever you need to do whatever it is you want. So it seems easy to be a parent if you can just give them the device and then they kind of leave you alone for the whatever it is you need to do. And that's kind of an insidious way that I think that becomes, both parents and teachers can lean on the technology a little too much. And in terms of classrooms, it's super easy to manage a classroom if you give all the kids a laptop. Are you kidding? They're going to be silent. And there's no fights, no arguments. I mean, at least verbally, it'll be happening online, but they're just sitting there staring at their screen. So we don't want to see it a lot of times because it's just can make things so much easier.
And and one of the problems is too is it's easy to fall in this trap, and I'm sure Joe and I are guilty of it all the time. Is kind of speak of technology as this monolith, right? It's either good
Right.
or it's either bad. And the truth be told, I mean, the technology is the modern day Swiss Army knife times a million. It does a bazillion different things. Many of them are good and helpful, and they make the world an unbelievably amazing place, and the world productivity's gone up in many ways, but it also does a lot of bad things, right? So anytime you bring up, for example, social media addiction, right? We know there's a lot of studies that there show a corollary relationship, even some that show a causal relationship between time on social media and depression, anxiety, suicide, suicidal ideation, all these negative health outcomes as a result of spending too much time on social media, right? But anytime you bring it up, well, there's all these negative health outcomes for social media. Somebody, an advocate, will say, well, it's true, but they can also connect with other depressed kids, and that community can be helpful. Or they could reach out to an online therapist. That's great too, right? And those, well, that's true, right? That's primarily not what they're doing, and mostly using it in ways that are detrimental. But yes, I guess there are some things you could do that are beneficial. And then that as a parent who's hearing it from both sides, it's really easy, or a teacher, it's really easy to go, just it kind of defeated. Like, what do I do? I don't know.
Yeah.
I that image of everyone sitting around, it really shifts my mind towards AI, or makes me think of the direction we're going with AI. And I know we talked a little bit about AI before, but I am struggling not to be someone that is like super ridiculously anti AI, because I know that it's coming and we have to, in some way be aware of it and work with it and understand how to use it. That's an important thing. But one of the things that I find the saddest about it is the loss of exactly what you guys talked about there. It those it Yes, it makes things. It'll seem like it makes things easier. I read I was referred to reading something else. I think it's the book Rewiring Education, where they were talking about, it's very, feels like it's very opposite of yours, but looking at all the great things that technology does for schools. And one of the concepts being that AI removes a lot of that lower level learning, which you guys talk about the importance of linear stages of learning, how we have to learn in a linear fashion. But part of that, they say, so it removes these easier pieces or parts so that the teachers can have all of this freedom, which I see as, parents like, great, they can have their date night while their kids are on a device. And so the AI can teach like these basic stuff so the teacher can go do all these incredible things, or the students are going to be able to have some higher level of learning. One thing that I think is kind of sad about that is I feel like and I'd love a teacher's perspective of this, because it seems to me like this concept is, I don't know, and it's almost giving you guys and I said, sorry, not to say you guys, but it's like it's giving teachers a pass the buck or something, that you wouldn't want to take that time to get to know what your students need and how to work through that struggle with them, so that, because that's some of the most formative pieces of their learning. Can you help me or just unpack a little bit of that? Is there value to teachers being the ones doing that formative work, or should we just be passing it off to AI?
Well, I mean, you probably know the answer we're gonna we're gonna give as teachers. So, yeah, I mean, I think of course, learning
Well, then
is
let me rephrase the question then. So how
yeah,
could we respond to people when they say,
yeah.
push that as being such a positive thing? Because I do like to encourage our moms, parents, viewers, like how to be able to respond when someone says, well, AI is going to free up all this stuff. So how can they give us a good way to respond with that?
The first thing is teaching and learning is it's a human enterprise, right? There's a back and forth that has to happen, human to human, and there's I mean, the research is, because like tools like ChatGPT are so new, the research is just now coming out. There was a study was released just this past June of 25 by MIT study, linking the use of ChatGPT to what they call cognitive decline, which essentially means getting dumber. So they it's not helping anybody, at least especially young people, get smarter. It's a tool just like any other tool, and if your brain already functions fully and you know how to solve problems and think critically and so on and so forth, then yeah, you can leverage some of the AI tools to help you with certain tasks and so on. The learning process is laborious, and it needs to be that way. But I'll just give you an example. Like, I mentioned my daughter is in sixth grade. She reads every night, every day. She loves reading. She's you know reading much more complex stuff than I was reading when I was in sixth grade. Um, she was identified as being, I don't know, having like a third grade reading level or a fourth grade reading level, because the reading assessments are all these online and or AI tools that she hates using. So she just clicks out of them. So she hasn't gotten up, she hasn't gotten her level up to where it could be. But a teacher, like her teachers all know, teachers aren't concerned at all. The teachers, will tell us, we know, she reads, she's great, she's probably ahead of grade level. But these, the county will send down these reports that said, here are your struggling readers, and she's on the list, and it's like, that's not the
Wow.
case. So you need the real danger is when we turn to me is when you turn over the decision making, the people who aren't in the classroom make the decisions about what direction education is going. And if the data they're collecting are bad data, then you're going to make bad decisions. And so the machine learning and all of the tools that they have collecting the data are, they're only as good as the inputs that are coming in. You get, a lot of kids would just get frustrated, and that's kids, if we've talked before about how frustrated they've gotten, and kids are clicking out, or they're just how long do I have to do this, and they just start clicking answers or whatever. Okay, now I can go to recess. If you're not getting good data, you're not going to make good decisions, and that's precisely what's happening.
That is fascinating. I actually hadn't thought about those parts of it, of having such or just not real, not true, not accurate results being fed
Right.
in. That's kind of scary. Did you
Yeah.
have anything else you wanted to add, Matt?
Yeah, and we have a lot of anecdotes about this, but kids, as you learn as a teacher, you write a test question, right, and you're very thoughtful, and you write down and you're looking for a particular answer, you realize your first unit of teaching, kids respond in really interesting and unpredictable ways, that shows understanding, but in a nuanced way that you weren't expecting. And you encounter it all the time. And as a human, I can say, oh, that's actually really interesting. You thought of that, I hate it. I got to go back and change kids' grades, or they'll say something, right? But it's fascinating to see. And AI just at this point can't handle that, right? They have, they have very kind of, they're a machine, right? They think like a machine does. There's a right and there's a wrong answer. And to not have that human voice listening to them is like Joe's explaining, extremely frustrating. I mean, I just tried to, I was trying to schedule a maintenance repair guy, and they were just sending me to AI driven responses. I'm screaming at the phone later, I need a human, right? Because it was just this circular logic back and forth, and you could tell the limitation of the thinking. I've seen that in ChatGPT and other things where they'll say something like, how explain the explain quadratic equations to me like this, and then it explains it in a very kind of like nonsensible, like very scientific kind of way. You say, explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old, and then it'll use like an analogy. But I've gone back and forth where it's just spitting back the same exact idea, but just like a little bit different, and it can be very quickly frustrating. Proponents would say how wonderful that is, and you could say, well, what about in this case, and talk to it. But it's just going back and forth, and it's exactly like dealing with that customer service experience where it just send me back and forth. It's infuriating because I could have a 5-second conversation with a human being and do this in really easily, and it's taken me 45 minutes because I'm dealing with an AI, right? And again, the world is a messy, unpredictable place, and I just don't think the technology is anywhere near as far along as people think it is in that regard.
Yeah.
Boy, you guys really highlight something very interesting there, which is this idea of playing back. So first of all, Joe, you were saying that your daughter's clicking out because she's getting frustrated with us. And then Matt, when you were talking about that, I was imagining you're talking about you are giving the example of your experience with ChatGPT, but imagine a younger kid, because that's part of what the experts tell us, right? That, well, the AI is so adaptive and whatever, so it's going to be able to analyze and figure it out right away. Well, if you're not giving it the right prompt, like you just said, of tell me like I'm a 2-year-old or whatever, if you don't say it exactly right or use exactly the right word or whatever, then AI is not necessarily going to be able to actually give you an answer. So now, and the kid doesn't know what they don't know. So they don't even know if they told it the wrong thing. That is absolutely. And okay, so then I always try to be objective with things wherever possible. And so I immediately step back and say, okay, so what would the response be? Oh, well, we'll just give it more data to learn all this. Thank you, but no, I don't need you to have so much data on me
Yeah.
that you're able to predict all those things.
Well,
That just scares me.
and what you're talking about is, by the way, been going on for a while. There's a lot of these different AI driven tech based schools have been around for a while. Mark Zuckerberg's, is it Rocket Ship?
Rocket
Um,
ship.
Hmm.
and what they'll do is they'll go into a struggling lower socioeconomic community that doesn't have a lot of resources. They'll offer a huge discount on their services, and they'll just stick these poor kids in front of screens all day. And one of the Mark Zuckerberg is not known for his altruism. One of the reasons why, I'm sure, is there's a certain level of experimentation on these kids. Learning is like we said, very messy, and one of the things that these AI driven platforms that have been around for a little bit, right, always struggled with, well, if A then B, then what is A, what is B, what is C, right? What is the linear nature in which kids are learning? And if you go wrong at B, do you go back to A? Do you go to A.5? Like, where do you go from there? And they really struggle with that. So the idea is, if we can get enough kids on these, being successful, not being successful, we can then use that data to better map out for future kids. Well, it's insidious what they're doing in some of these inner city schools and some of these places where they're essentially making these students guinea pigs.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really awful. That touches on the next thing I want to talk about, which is the edtech or education industrial complex, because that's really what it feels like we are up against. And in the book, you referenced the musical, one of my favorites, The Music Man, and how he invents this problem that this lovely little town did not have at all, but he convinced them that there was a problem and that they needed to fix it, right, by buying musical instruments, which he couldn't teach them how to play and didn't actually have them to sell anyway. So obviously, EdTech has plenty of things to attempt to teach us, and plenty of things to sell us. Why? What do you think was the reason behind this? Because I guess it is just money, but like, how can you unpack that a bit of what we can do, what we're up against? Because I think in particular, you touch on Common Core and the way that was brought about and
Yeah.
Microsoft's part in it. And that just so floored me. I just want you to unpack that a bit. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
yeah, I mean, I just mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. Now he's kind of gotten out of the game, but when they asked him why he was spending all this money on learning platforms and going the education route, his response, and I'm paraphrasing here, his response was, I'm sure the interviewer was expecting something about loving education and all kids are learning. His immediate response was, "Did you know that education's like a $500 billion a year industry?" Right? That was his initial response, right? I mean,
Wow.
that's the first thing that came to his mind when they asked him why he was getting an education. And I think Bill Gates has a big hand in it too, and I think he's a little bit more savvy and has a little bit more tact than Mark Zuckerberg. But that I think that's a huge motive. It's a huge $1 billion a year industry. The problem is, and this is where Common Core comes in, is in our system of federalism. There's 3,000 different school systems. You don't just sell to schools, right? You have to have a huge marketing campaign and sell all these independent districts using different technology, different devices, different capabilities. And if you can unify that under one kind of federal policy, then now I'm only selling it to one group. I'm just selling it to the federal government, and now all kids are on. And that's why I think Mark Zuckerberg was so involved and interested in Common Core. And there's some there, Joe. It's been so long, right? Wasn't there something about like Microsoft devices were the only ones to kind of be able to use the different?
Yeah, it was Gates. Obviously donates to campaigns and so on, but kind of helped push through the idea of Common Core, and then conveniently Common Core came preloaded. All the Common Core standards and lessons and unit plans by grade level came preloaded on all of the devices that they were providing. So yeah, like Matt pointed out, if you can nationalize education, then all you have to do is sell that one person on the idea. Now, thankfully, a lot of states have given up on Common Core, and not because the idea of national standards are necessarily bad or state standards are necessarily bad, but the way that particular model was rolled out it left a lot of educators out of the process, and it left a lot of the people who were experts in what it looks like in kindergarten versus fifth grade versus 12th grade were left out of the process. But to your wider or bigger question, just about the unpacking the whole thing, there was a roadmap that EdTech followed, and it was the roadmap of the cigarette industry. And there's a day of reckoning coming for EdTech, just like there was a day of reckoning that came for the cigarette industry. The cigarette industry faked data, convinced us that it was no big deal. They made things that were intentionally addictive. People died. Right? There was this whole process that went on, and all the while, big tobacco was making billions and billions of dollars over the years. They got medical professionals to lie. They again faked research and so on. EdTech has done the exact same thing. They pay for their own research that, shocker, shows that EdTech is the greatest thing in the world. They make the products intentionally addictive. Kids are being harmed and dying and killing themselves. and schools are buying in. I'm sure not maliciously, but schools are buying in because they just think it's the wave of the future, and so on and so forth. As these layers get peeled back around the way ed tech wormed its way into public education in particular, there is a day of reckoning coming for sure. That because the lawsuits and the when Zuckerberg got hauled to Capitol Hill to face the parents of kids who had killed themselves because of social media bullying and so on. That was the beginning. That was the prologue to what I'm sure will be a very long and messy process. But they the roadmap was there for ed tech to get in because they just followed essentially what big tobacco did, and the roadmap is there for us in terms of how to push it out, and it's going to be a long, expensive process.
That is,
Hopefully, it happens quicker than it did with tobacco.
yeah, I think you're right, though. It's not the most yay thing to think of, but I think you're right
No,
that it's gonna hurt and it's gonna take a while. But I do think
yeah,
it's gonna come because we're already seeing people are seeming to wake up, which is encouraging. It's so
yeah.
encouraging.
People like you are doing programs like this, and I mean this is exactly what needs to happen. Is people have to get educated, and then get angry and get motivated to push back and say, not my kid's brain. you know,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna have to you're gonna have to figure something else out.
Not to be a guinea pig. That just is like horrific to think about the idea of
Right.
them testing or essentially just using kids as guinea pigs. It's just so awful.
Yeah.
But I do want to come back to I know we're right at time, so I'll wrap it up that on kind of a more positive note, I guess, because one thing that I think you guys do well is you're not saying that, we can't have any technology at all. And
Right.
you do finish with a proposal and a vision of what modern education or education can look like in the modern world, because we do live in a modern world with technology and schools
Right.
are probably going to use some of it. So talk to me about what parents can do to help bring about an ideal education in their schools.
Well, I think the main thing is to, if we can all think of it as a partnership working together with the school, as opposed to, I mean, schools a lot of times will be recalcitrant and push back against parents. If we can partner together to all realize that we're on the same team, everybody wants the same things for kids. Everybody wants happier, healthier, smarter, more motivated, more knowledgeable, more skillful kids. As long as we can acknowledge that, like, use that as a jumping off point, then I think we're going to have more productive discussions. Now, what does that actually look like? I think the first thing would be programs like one to one, where every kid gets a computer that they take home, and immediately to me send the wrong message that, oh, it's the device that does the teaching, and so you can't learn without this device. And you can have this exact same experience, which is every kid has access to a laptop all day long, by just providing carts, which we used to do this. Provide a cart. There's one in every classroom, but the laptops are stored. And then if I, as the teacher, say, we're going to need to look at this thing online or whatever, you get these series of questions that you're going to look at, Congress, blah blah blah. Everybody go get a laptop. You take it to your desk. You got these 5 things to do. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do it. Boop boop boop. Done. Close the laptop. Put it back on the cart. Just immediately then what you're acknowledging is that the laptop or iPad or whatever is a tool. And that's all it is. It's a tool just like chalk and a blackboard or pen and pencil or pen and paper. Um, and so that's, I think the discussions that we have, parent to teacher to administrator and so on, need to focus on that. The tech is there and it's super useful as a tool, and it's one tool that can do certain things, but not everything. And that's to me, the big background.
I like that. Do you have anything else you want to add, Matt?
Yeah, I think you know everybody's so like excited when laptop use and tablets became pretty much ubiquitous in education. There was this kind of idea that if I'm a good teacher, I have to put everything online, and there was no intentionality, right? So instead of being a sage on a stage, the old school teacher just lecturing all day, they would just you know provide a link of somebody else lecturing and sending it to the kids. Now they're watching on their laptop instead of in a human interaction, right? There was very little intentionality. Let's just take what we were doing traditionally for the last, I don't know, 3,000 years and move it onto a laptop. Now it's better. Poof, 21st century. And there are absolutely things that I use laptops for and have my students use that they couldn't do 15, 20 years ago, right? Like they do have, infinite, access to research and stuff that just wasn't possible by taking them down to the library, right? So that's incredible, right? And there are opportunities, but that intentionality, can I do this without the laptop? Because again, when that kid pops that shell open, understand they're a kid, right? And it's somewhat level of a Pandora's box where you're going to bring in, YouTube, and you're bringing in all these other things. So what is that intention? Can I do this without it, right? I used to have my kids do a lot of writing because typing, you can type a lot faster on, a laptop. They're writing an essay and there's, certain uses there. I don't do that anymore because of ChatGPT. I'm back to, for essays, everything we write in class is pen and paper because I've realized that the technology inhibits the learning there, right? But that as educators and as parents, that intentionality, what is this tech doing? And is it better? Is there a way? Is it absolutely necessary? Does it make learning better? And there are absolutely answers where that's yes, right? Then use it, right? But just because it's on a device doesn't mean it's 21st century or we're now hearing 22nd century skills coming be a phrase because 21st century skills are already antiquated. So so
I'm not ready for the 22nd century. Just hold on. I'm not even through like half of the first of the 21st century. Good Lord. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's it. Just what is the purpose? Like Joe said, it's a tool, and there are absolutely things that, again, technology is not a monolith. There are things that it does more incredibly than we could do 10, 20 years ago, and there's a lot of stuff that it doesn't.
I love the realistic approach that you guys have taken to this, and I just want to encourage everyone to go get your book because it really truly is so interesting. I'm an audiobook girl. I actually got audio, and I still, as much as I do the digital, I like to be able to look at it as well and then make notes and all of that stuff. But because I did find out, by the way, that was fun in one of our other interviews, and you guys probably already knew this, that memory is a three-dimensional thing, which is why it's so important to have the analog version, because I will remember where it is on the page in the book, how far through, and it's just fascinating to me how that works. But in any case, any final thoughts? Can you share where people can find you, learn more about what you're doing and what you have done, and I think you guys said you might have an upcoming book or other things that you're working on.
Yeah, you can always engage with us at screenschool.com. The link where you can get directly in contact with us. There's also research there and things that we've done and media appearances and so on. But we're working on a new book. It's a little bit wider in scope, but there's definitely a edtech component to it. But we'll keep you posted when that gets closer to publication.
Exciting. Very exciting.
We stay pretty on brand about social media. We're terrible at promoting ourselves. We got nothing.
we don't have any social media. Yeah.
That is totally fine. Honestly, I have enjoyed talking with you, and you guys are great at responding and sharing your thoughts and insights. And thank you again for putting together this work, because I know it was very much needed to help expose what we are up against in this country. And with more people coming together or actually waking up, I think that we can see some hope in the future. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having us. This was great.
Thank you.
Well, that was an eye-opening conversation. This book is even more so. I strongly encourage you to read it. Screen School challenges us to rethink these assumptions that we've been told, that more technology equals better education. And of course, if it's labeled educational, well, then it must be okay. Not so much. So if you're still thinking, but my kid needs an iPad in order to succeed, maybe it's time to ask, succeed at what? Endless scrolling? When the people creating these tools are opting for chalkboards over tablets for their own kids, maybe it's time we ask why. Here's the takeaway: tech can be a powerful tool, but it should be considered complementary to learning and teaching. It does not substitute for critical thinking, human connection, or engaged teaching. So, what's next? Well, go out and grab Screen Schooled and read it. Share it with your friends, your school board, and maybe that one parent who thinks that TikTok is actually an educational platform. You can always come back and join us for more here at M4L Academy, where we talk with more amazing authors looking at other books. And of course, check out our website, m4lacademy.org, for all of the different toolkits that we have created on other topics, including SEL, CRT, DEI, oh, so many more, because we believe that informed parents make empowered kids. Until next time, log off, look up, and remember, the best screen for your child might just be a window. Class dismissed.